So let's start on our back. We'll begin with the banana pose. So go ahead and lay on back. And I just like to move my hips to the right edge of the mat so that I have room for the rest of my body. But you don't have to do that if you've got a carpet or something and you don't want to do that, but that's usually what I do. And then you just move your left leg to the left and then cross your right ankle over it. Bring your arms up overhead, grab your right wrist with your left hand, and then pull it over to the left. And you may have to, I'm going to do this, you may have to sort of wiggle yourself over. Okay? And then you'll notice I'm bringing my left arm down right now. And that's because I have an injury in my left shoulder, and keeping it up here aggravates that injury. And that's a great example of one of the principles when we practice. Everything I tell you to do needs to be within the range of what you feel is safe. So again, if I were taking this class and they said, grab your wrist and pull it over, and then I felt that pain, in which I do, I'll just bring my arm down as a modification. I still feel the stretch here. That's what's important. So as always, there's three things that we need to check in our own mind. I feel safe, I feel the stretch, and I feel comfortable enough that I'll be able to maintain this for 5 minutes. Okay? let's take our time switching sides. And as you come through center, I'm just going to encourage you to take a moment and just feel the two sides and see if you can feel a difference. And if you can't, it's okay. Maybe it's very subtle. And then when you're ready, you just bring yourself into banana pose on the other side. Remember, the pose is quote unquote right when we feel the stretch, we feel safe, and we feel comfortable enough to hold the position for the full allotted time, which today is 5 minutes. This particular posture is targeting our obliques and intercostal muscles. The intercostals are between your ribs. You have two layers, internal and external. One helps you to expand your ribs, and the other helps you to contract them when doing deep breathing. Again, these muscles can often get weak and stiff, so that it makes deep breathing difficult or impossible or painful for some people. I've had students in the past too, when I asked them to breathe deeply, they said it hurts. And then they would say, well, it hurts in a good way. Well, breathing ultimately really shouldn't hurt. So that's one of the things that can happen to us when we really live a very sedentary life. This particular posture, again, can help us begin to create that openness, stretching those muscles out. And then the obliques are a little lower. They're in our waist. They connect the upper part of the pelvis from like the iliac crest up into our ribs. And so the further our ribs come from the crest of the pelvis here, you can feel that, palpate that for yourself if you like. So the further those go, the more we're stretching those obliques. And I include 4 muscles in this group: transverse abdominis, internal obliques, external obliques, and quadratus lumborum, or QL for short. Okay, so let's go ahead and unwind. Come back to neutral. Again, we can feel both sides, just compare, notice the changes, if any. And then let's bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it off. And then we will hinge up to seated. So hands under the hips, palms down, legs straight unless there's pain in your back, and then you bend your knees. Lift the head and neck, take a deep breath, exhale, lower the legs. Just before they touch, pause, inhale, and exhale up. Okay, next we'll do some fairly straightforward forward folds, and this is to target the muscles on the back. Now, anytime I ask people in yoga to join their feet together, there's at least somebody who tries to do this, because this is a pose that they've learned. It's called Baddha Konasana, the cobbler's pose, okay? Or upward angle pose in Sanskrit. So that's not what we're doing today. We're going to take our feet, we're going to push them out, and then come forward. Generally, you're looking down at the soles of your feet, and you can experiment a little bit closer and further out. But that other pose is a groin stretch, and we're trying to stretch our back. So this is butterfly pose, okay? Now feel free to use support. So if you have blocks under your knees, if your knees are in the air, you don't like the way that feels, I'm fine like this. I don't feel any pressure or strain with my knees in the air, but other people might. So you could put support under the knees. If your head feels heavy and your neck is sensitive, you could put a block under your forehead. And if it's too intense in your back, you could lay on a bolster or put 2 blocks under your forearms. Okay. Now, anytime I mention support, I try and mention that Yin Yoga and restorative are different. And so we need to be sure that we don't have too much support. And the checklist I gave you at the beginning will help you avoid that. So, do I feel safe? Do I feel the stretch? That's the key. So I come into this position and I'm all propped up on my bolster and my blocks and everything, and I don't feel any stretch in my back, then it's too much. I need to have a little bit of sense that I'm lengthening back here, stretching back here. Now, granted, it's not going to be super intense. Okay, I probably actually feel more in my hips than I do my back. That's just because there's not much tension back here. Okay. And of course, the final checkbox is, will I be able to, am I comfortable enough where I can hold this for 5 minutes? So, small things like the ankles digging into the ground, right? Your feet, the bones in your feet digging into the ground. After a minute or two, if that's really uncomfortable, you may have to adjust or move or fix that, okay? So don't be afraid to add some padding where you need it so that you'll be able to maintain the position. The time we spend in the postures is very, very important, okay, for the benefit that we get. All right, so we'll come up, and what we'd like to do now is take the legs out straight. Very simple change, and we'll just again come forward. We can support the forearms, the forehead again. We're looking for the stretch back here. So those are our intrinsic muscles in our back. We have many, many, many layers of muscles back there. I'm not going to name them all. We come forward and down. Generally, once we've straightened the legs, it's a more intense stretch. And the other thing that's happening from a Taoist perspective, where we're looking at energy lines in the body, this is affecting the kidney and urinary bladder sinew channels. These are a myofascial meridian that runs through the muscles. So we're a little over halfway. Sometimes it's a good idea to check in, see if anything needs adjusting at this point. And in general, we want to try and avoid a lot of extra movement. But I never want you to feel like sometimes intelligent, mindful adjustments aren't necessary or desirable. So sometimes we can take ourselves a little deeper if that's appropriate. Other times we might actually back off a little bit. Sometimes that's the right approach. Add or take away a little support. So it's important when practicing to remember we don't ever want to be too rigid or dogmatic in our approach. We have general guidelines that help us get the most out of what we're doing, but it's not a religion, it's not law. We aren't good or bad people if we follow, the guidelines perfectly. All right, let's come on up and we'll make our way gradually back onto the back. Okay, we'll bring those legs in, give them a nice squeeze. Again, movement here is important. So even if you don't really feel like moving, I recommend that you add a little bit of movement in, at least a bit. You might move a little, you might move a lot, you might move gently, you might move vigorously. And then when you're done, hinge on up as last time. Okay. And now we'll take a look at half dragonfly. Okay. So many people, you don't have to, but I like to turn to face the long side of the mat, like so. The legs are straight and wide. And then we'll be folding over our left foot to start. So I fold over and I'm just going to hold the foot. So it's the difference between holding myself in place and pulling down. So I'm not pulling down, I'm just holding myself in place. And what I'm looking for is a stretch here. Remember, we did this earlier. That was in our banana pose. So we're trying to stretch here. So if I feel that, then I'm just going to stay here. And then if I don't, I begin to roll or stack my right shoulder over my left shoulder like so. Now it's even better if you feel a stretch in here. These are your adductors. And this is the liver channel in here. And this is the gallbladder channel here. And these are like mates, partners. So they're yin-yang to one another. And so if we can get the liver in as well, that's great. If you can't, no problem. If you just get your side here, this is the main objective today. So the energy channels is a secondary element in today's class. So again, I named this torso flow, not the yin meridian flow. Very often I try and target anatomical areas, but with an eye on the energy channels. So whenever possible, I try and do a complete rotation of the 6 yin meridians in the lower part of the body, as well as hitting some nice, juicy myofascial areas in our torso or our thighs or our hips. Okay? So that's true of today's class as well. Okay, everyone. So gradually making your way to the other side. And again, you might pause here in the middle and just see, can I feel the effect of that stretch on my waist? And hopefully the answer is yes. Honestly, it's okay if the answer is no, too. We're just trying to see. But it's nice to feel the results or the effects of what we're doing in the body. Okay, please take your time. Gradually make your way back onto your back. Before you counter stretch, just relax and feel. So I don't know about you, but I definitely can feel that in my back. So again, oftentimes while we're doing a pose, we feel our muscles. When we come out of the pose, we feel the joints. The joints just, it's generally the way that they work. And it doesn't necessarily feel good. I don't mean that we feel muscles and the stretch feels good or pleasant. It might. Sometimes stretching feels good. Some people like to stretch, others don't. And then it's the same when we come out. I don't think most people like that feeling in the joints. I'll just say that. So it's kind of like an achy feeling, vulnerable, sensitive feeling in the joints. And very often we associate that with our joints not being safe. But if we're practicing properly with Yin, then our joints are safe. And that sensation is just telling us that we created a positive effect on the joints. So even though today is not a spine flow, we're focusing on the muscles in the torso, it still will affect those joints. So you can't isolate them away from one another. Okay, let's bring our legs in. We'll shake it out. Okay, so this next pose, you can hinge up and then grab your blocks, okay? Before I show you what we're going to do, I just want to show the alternate. So if you don't have blocks, or if this posture is not for you for whatever reason, then here is what you'll be doing. Okay, the Sphinx or the seal should be very familiar, very simple, common back bends that we use in Yin. If you have your blocks, then grab your blocks and you'll put one for your head and then one more or less between the shoulder blades, and you'll notice they're different heights, so you can try different ways of positioning them. You know, everyone's different, and the way that your body interacts with the props will be different depending on what works for you. So we lay back, and you can also do whatever you like with your legs. So they can be straight, they can be bent. So I'm just going to play around with this block so I can lay back on it safely and relatively comfortably, and one under my head as well. Okay, and then what I'm looking for here is a stretch here. This is called your pectoralis and your anterior deltoid. So arms will play around from a T to a Y position or even a W position. And we want to feel just a nice opening and stretching in the front of the chest. Now the block under your head, you can choose to either keep it, lower it, or remove it even, and then that will generate a stretch in the front of your neck. But if you feel like it's too much compression for your neck, then you just put the block back, okay? Okay, so please take your time. You're going to remove the blocks. And let's keep one block handy, okay? And we'll come back on our back. Now again, before I do this next posture, I want to demonstrate the alternate. You can do Sphinx and Seal again if you don't have blocks or you don't want to do this next posture, or you can't for some reason. Or you can try this, which is the full saddle pose. This is actually probably more difficult than the pose we're going to do, but you're welcome to try that if you know how to do it safely, if you're an experienced Yin practitioner. What we'll do today is a supported bridge. So we come back onto the back, and sometimes people try and lay back on the block. Don't do that. Lift your hips up and then position the block. And there are 3 different heights that you can use. I'm going to use the highest one just because from experience, it's usually where I need to go for it. Now the block, my pelvis is resting on the block, okay? It's not my spine, it's not my buttocks, so it's not too low, it's not too high, it's just kind of on that flat bone there. And then once I've got that positioned, I want to be sure I don't have too much compression in my back. And what I'm looking for is a stretch right in here. This is called your rectus abdominis, and it extends from your pubic bone up to your ribs. So the more that my pelvis tilts that way, and the more that my ribs tilt this way, the more that this muscle group is going to be lengthened, okay? Now it is a back bend, so compression in your back is going to be a concern here. But the main thing we're trying to do is stretch right in here. This is the stomach and spleen channel running right through here that we're working. And you can play around with the legs. So mine are mostly straight, but some people that might be too intense. So you can back off a little bit by bending your knees a bit, placing your feet on the ground. And then it can also be helpful to extend the arms overhead. Sometimes very subtle tweaks can make the difference between feeling the stretch versus not. Okay, so just gradually take your time. Again, if we're successful in affecting our joints, which is part of Yin Yoga, again, it's not the focus of today's class, but it's going to happen anyway, then the joints will feel very sensitive when we come out, and moving quickly will make them feel unsafe. Will feel unsafe. So you want to take your time. You notice I'm not straightening my knees right away. I took my time coming back down. Okay, so just let the joints in your back, which were affected, even though we're trying to stretch here, it's going to compress those joints. So let them rest for a moment. And then when you're ready, you can give them a nice squeeze. Okay, so that was our torso flow. As ever, we want to take a few minutes just to let our body rest before we get on with the rest of our day. So laying back on your back in a comfortable position with the palms up, head centered, chin tucked in slightly. It's fine if you want to put a pillow under your knees or a couple of blocks under your knees if that feels better. And then I recommend just grab your phone or your timer and set it for 6 minutes, and then just allow yourself to relax in stillness for the next 6 minutes.